So what I want to show you now is another use of the wiggle. So when I showed you the wiggler last time, it was just to kind of move it around and make it look nervous. But I want you to understand that the wiggler can actually be used for pretty much any parameter that has a stopwatch. Okay, so what I want to do first is let's go ahead and open up the wiggler so that it shows up over here. And this time, let's go ahead and wiggle the opacity. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on the stopwatch. So I created a keyframe at the beginning, and let's just move it, I don't know, 5 seconds later, right? We'll change the parameter of this opacity to 90%. And with these, I'm going to select the word opacity to select both keyframes. And now I'm going to just change the frequency and the magnitude and hit apply. And so now when I pre-render it, and that will wiggle the opacity. All right. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you as well is how to get your file out of After Effects. All right, and so there's something called render queue, and some of you have already experienced this, but if you go to export, there's an option here to add to render queue, or under composition you can just go to add to render queue. And what that does is this opens up this queue here, and basically you can have a whole bunch of things ready to go. In other words, you have to create a finalized version that will be a clip unto itself. So before I do that, let's go ahead and look back at our effects here, and we might as well just use this one here. And I want you to see that there is no work area here. Right now, if I had a work area, let's say I hit N, so now I have a work area. And when I go to my render queue now, what I want to make sure is happening is when I hit the words best setting, where it's blue, this opens up this window here. And here's where it's telling you that one of the options is how much of it do you want to render? Do you want to render just the work area or the length of the comp? And this is really important. If you've got a 30-second comp, and you only have 5 seconds of animation, you don't want to render out 30 seconds because then you might get this giant file that'll be too big to upload or move around. So be aware of what you actually want to render out. Do you want it to be the length of the comp, or do you want it to be the work area? I'm going to choose length of comp for now and ignore the work area. And notice here that I want the quality to be best. Resolution is going to be full. And so that's going to pretty much overwrite any of the settings that you have. If you were looking at it at a quarter, when you render it out, it's going to render it out as the full resolution. These other things here I'm going to just ignore for the moment. All I want you to pay attention to right now is the length of the comp or work area and quality being best. And then I'm going to say OK, and notice now that this has changed from best settings to custom. Next thing here is if I click on the word lossless. When you go to lossless, this tells you how do you want to render this out. And this sort of depends on what you want to do with it. By default, it comes up as a QuickTime, and the format option is an animation. So if I wanted to change it to something else, I certainly can. I'm going to leave it at QuickTime, but I want to pay more attention to the format options. Okay? Underneath format options, we have video codecs. And here by default, it's on animation, but you might want to render it out as an Apple ProRes. Apple ProRes is probably the best one to choose for quality's sake, but it's also going to be the largest file. Animation is going to be pretty large, and it's also lossless, except if you bring it into another application, you might have to render it out. If you are working in Premiere and you have your settings set at Apple ProRes 422, maybe you want to select that, and then you say OK. Do you want to change the size of it? You can do that here. I'm not going to. It has auto audio. So if you have audio on it, you might want to turn that on or off, or just leave it on auto. And how do you want the audio to render out? In this particular one, there is no sound. So it doesn't really matter. I'm going to turn it off. But typically I'm going to leave this at 48 kilohertz at 16-bit stereo. And again, format option, you can change the quality of the sound if you want to change it to be something else. I'm going to leave it there because it doesn't matter for this situation. And let's turn it to off. And the last thing that you want to do is output 2. It says not yet specified. I click on the words not yet specified. And here's where I'm saying where am I going to put it and what am I going to call it. So for now I'm going to put it on the desktop, and I'll just call it test render. And when you're ready to go, notice that there's a check mark here. Okay, and that check mark is telling me that I can hit render. The reason is you can have multiple things in the render queue, and then when you hit render, it's going to go through your whole list of things that need to be rendered. So if you have a lot of things to happen, sometimes it could take hours to render something. And if that's the case, you want to make sure that you've allotted enough time to do so. So maybe you want them all to render at the same time when you go to sleep. I'm going to hit render. That was a pretty fast one. And so now if I let's close After Effects for the moment. I'm going to say After Effects hide. And if I take a look at that file now, here it is, and I double click it, it's going to open it up, and so here's that file. Okay? And if I take a look at what this file actually is, if I'm going to say get info, I can see that it's Apple ProRes 422. It's a standard definition video, 720 by 486, because that was the default that I used here. And the size of the file is 5.6 megabytes. Okay, and that is the name of that one.